Brady Swenson, one of the founders of Swan Bitcoin, released a video. Actually, Bitcoin Amsterdam released the video because he gave the talk on stage, and it's under 18 minutes of some of the most dense Bitcoin time philosophy that we've come across. We've recently been exploring Bitcoin and the concept of time, having covered Gigi's Bitcoin is Time, and also talking about the latter part of Nick Land's book, Xenosystems, which brings into play the discussion points that Bitcoin has with regard to time. Brady takes this a step further. He's talking about civilization. He's talking about the cadence of our lives. He's talking about the quality of our lives and the things that we can build with time that we no longer seem to have. We seem to be rushing about everywhere. We seem to be starting things that we don't finish. We seem to be looking at the world with a shorter point of reference, a bit farsighted, I think. We can only see the things that are close to us, and we can't see what's down the pipe. And part of that has to do with this age of acceleration of technology that we're in, where change is happening at a more rapid pace, and that rapid pace is accelerating. But also part of it happens to do with the monetary structure that we live under, the mechanical clock paired with fiat money.
Yeah.
And so we're going to discuss that here today, Brady's talk at Bitcoin Amsterdam, and we're going to see where it goes.
TikTok, Next Block, The Cadence of Civilization by Brady Swenson. He gave this talk at the Kansas City Bitcoin Summit as well. I heard it then, and I was really struck by it. You did a good job summarizing kind of its significance, and for us too, in the kind of the trajectory of our thinking on Bitcoin. Like you mentioned, we read Gigi's Bitcoin is Time, where we saw how Bitcoin, it was necessary for Satoshi to give Bitcoin a notion of time and able to allow money to take on a digital form. In order for there to be a ledger, there has to be a notion of time, because you have to be able to say which transactions occur after other transactions, and you have to be able to preempt the double spend problem, which in cyberspace you can just copy and paste something. How do you stop that from happening? Satoshi brings a notion of time into digital space. He makes Bitcoin as a time chain. We saw how TikTok Next Block is this idea that in Gigi's essay, Bitcoin is a clock. It's ticking. Every block that's added is how it is keeping time by ordering transactions. And so we looked at Gigi's Bitcoin is Time. Then, as you mentioned, we looked at Land, Xenosystems, and he talks about two things that are really relevant to Brady Swenson's talk. He mentioned how capital, by its nature, has kind of a cybernetic dynamic where it is constantly accelerating, constantly seeking greater returns. But there's also this thing that is Bitcoin, and Land talks about it. He uses a zombie analogy, the thing that it can never die, because for it to die, it would need to be laid eternally to rest. But Bitcoin itself is eternal in the sense that it's self-sustaining outside of human control. And so you can never fully lay it to rest, because then some enterprising soul will stash it, and then it'll have some value because somebody wants to stash it. So another person will also want to stash a bit of it, and then it's going to resurrect and have some price. So we're looking, just considering time and Bitcoin, the nature of capital. And here we get to TikTok, Next Block, The Cadence of Civilization. And it was so TikTok Next Block. Swenson starts this talk off noting that it's a meme or a phrase that he coined in a tweet when he's talking celebrating the 600,000th block of Bitcoin time, saying TikTok Next Block, indicating that this thing is going to keep on running. It's maybe not fail safe, but so far it has been, and barring something unforeseen, it's going to keep on going. TikTok Next Block, adding a new block, and he starts off. So this is going to tie that notion of timekeeping, the notion of keeping time, to the nature of civilization, that timekeeping defines a civilization, defines how people act in that civilization. It defines culture and morality and economics. And he starts off noting different forms of timekeeping throughout civilization that begins with watching the sky. Like you look at the movement of the stars. He notes that the Nile, they could tell when the Nile was going to flood because a certain star was in ascent or something like that. And so people begin to keep time by observing the world around it, the way that it changes. And so the very first notions of time he calls natural time. We're really just operating in the world, looking at the sky, and then using that to craft our first calendars, right?
Yeah, it's more natural time is more observational. Mechanical time is more of a dictate,
Yeah, machine
right?
time is what he's going to call it. So we
Machine
have
time.
natural time
Yeah.
and machine time, the two notions of time we're going to get to. Yeah.
Land's propensity to use a zombie analogy. We should know. We looked up his favorite movies. He digs that kind of thing. But you could also say it's everlasting, just in the sense of you could take a eternal life type of approach to say it as well.
Yeah.
That the land is trying to say that, with the zombie analogy, that it can't be killed.
Yep.
But then there's also the other side of can't be killed also means lives forever.
Hmm.
One of them might be a little more optimistic than the other, or at least have I don't know, at least have a shinier surface to
Yeah.
gaze upon.
And Land explicitly talks about using horror as a form of
Yeah.
art to construct concepts, to explain abstract notions to ourselves. That abstraction is fully brought, or most fully brought, into art through conventions of horror. And he
Yeah.
talks about other types of, The Fly, the movie The Fly, the mutation in that movie is a way that form escapes itself. So we can talk about the thing that is maybe form with a capital F, what that means, and then mix abstraction with images and come to a better understanding through horror.
And it goes along with human psychology too, in that Tony Robbins, big fan of saying that change is something that you don't do until the pain of staying the same exceeds the pain of changing. And so there is, Tim Ferriss talks about this with like a fear setting practice, which is like putting in your mind the consequences of your actions if you continue down that path, in order to incite in yourself enough fear to change so that hopefully you don't have to go through that rock bottom. Hopefully you don't have to go through that, sleeping in a ditch or whatever
Yeah.
to make that change. So fear and horror, which is, it's using fear to generate this emotional response, very useful to affect positive change. So
Yeah.
I don't begrudge Land one bit for using that
Yeah.
as a mechanism.
No, and it's helpful to explain. And bringing us back to where Brady starts here, with a natural notion of time, it strikes me too, he doesn't talk about, but there's also the circadian rhythms of the body. We look to nature to observe maybe a more objective sense of time, but we're also born with a sense of time, right? I mean, maybe that's like pegged to nature, like the sun coming up keys our biological clock into that rhythm. And so we know when to sleep and when to be wakeful and things like that. But we do have this notion of natural time, as Brady develops here, as a sort of humane time, a sort of slow time, a time in which we can do things like build pyramids, projects that take, I imagine, either hundreds of years or aliens.
I was going to say four aliens.
For aliens, right?
Yeah. I got to say that I heard this great comedian make a great joke about, he's Mexican, by the way, so he's allowed to say this.
Yeah.
He says that Mexicans are proof. No one ever doubts that Mexicans do work, because we look at the pyramids of Giza and we're like, we have no idea how those were built. We have no clue. But turns out that there's pyramids in Mexico. They're even bigger, and no one questions who built those. They're like, yeah, definitely Mexicans. Yeah.
That is a funny joke.
Yeah. Yeah. Just wanted to throw that in there for our Mexican brethren.
Yeah. Timekeeping mechanisms then develop in the form of to keep natural time, like sundials and obelisks to measure like lengthening shadows, things like that. There's then a moment in Brady's accounting of natural time where things shift. I really thought this was an interesting part of his talk, where talking about natural time, he then talks about what the Babylonians did. They he says something like brought time into the ledger.
Yeah.
They're the ones that gave us through their base 60 system, which we kind of take for granted. We get 24 hours, 60 minutes, 60 seconds, as a way to account for the day. But that whole notion of making time quantifiable, that we're talking about this before we watched the talk, and we're talking throughout it very annoyingly. If we had been there, it would have been not fun. But as we were watching Brady's talk, we were talking, and like the first notion of natural time tied to the rising of the sun, the falling of the sun, the stars, their movements throughout the year, is kind of this fluid time
Yeah.
almost, and
Yeah.
it's a longer time. There's no minute, there's no second.
Fluid is the word for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not delineated into chop, 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 chop.
Yes.
Yep.
And the Babylonians, though, chop it for the first time. Again, they give us this idea of quantity. And when quantity enters the picture, time changes. It's a ledger. We can account for it and do things. We can make our day a sort of account book where we know for this number of minutes or hours, I'll do this thing. And that's when he talks about monastic life as a sort of regimentation of the day. They have mechanical clocks and bells ring throughout the day, and they're able, now we quantify time, and so that changes spiritual life even a bit. Maybe before you had solar religions that even worshipped, the sun as a deity, a god. God is now more abstract in other forms of monotheism. Spiritualism is different, and in monastic accounting, the day becomes maybe commodified in a sense and regimented, and a thing where you can move the minutes around like dollars or cents, right?
I really liked your analogy of how with time we're able to turn monasteries into somewhat of like a factory of
Yeah.
religion where, here's your one bowl of gruel and your 14 Hail Marys and your 25.
You can literally clock in at the
Yeah.
beginning of the day.
Yeah. It's like, I'm checking this stuff off as I go through the day. And now I've completed my shift of monking. I'll go monk.
Yeah.
Go monk somewhere else for a bit
Yeah.
and rest my monkey.
Uh-huh.
Monkey.
But
Yeah.
monking is a lot more. There is a certain form of spirituality that is enabled by regimentation of time. We also discussed this. I went to a silent meditation retreat, and time was kept there throughout the day by bells, gongs ringing. And you knew meditation was over when a gong would ring. And if you didn't have that way, an external referent to pull you out of your meditative space, it would be very difficult to meditate, because you couldn't say, I'm going to sit down for an hour. You would sit down, meditate, and then lose any external reference. You move into interior space. It's tough to tell when you're meditating if you've been there for 10 minutes or 10 hours in a sense, because time is different when you're inside yourself only. Dilates maybe, or maybe it contracts at points, but
See, that's where, yeah, I brought this up. That's where I think I disagree, because I feel like meditation certainly was around prior, and I'm sure that
yes.
people sat cross-legged and closed their eyes and cleared their head, and I would assume that they just stopped meditating when the job was done, when
The
whatever
job.
the job of meditating or the task, or whenever they felt as though they were done. And I think I understand what you're saying, where because meditation is difficult, that you have that clock and you have that knowing that I am going to sit here until that bell rings, even
Yeah.
though I want to get up, even though I'm not comfortable, even though this does not feel good right now. And I can see how that would be incentivizing to do that. Um, but I question whether or not meditation was difficult prior to time. I wonder if it was.
I bet it's
'Cause
always been difficult,
I don't
but
know, because like,
I mean, prior to the mechanical keeping of time, when we only
yeah,
had
but I
natural
mean, the
time,
reason meditation's difficult right now is because we live in this fiat world of
it's more
the
difficult for
extraction
sure.
and attention
Yeah.
economy. And I think that it, I, I was at the network school with a bunch of meditators, and some that were, I mean, multiple 11-day retreats per year. And they were doing this every day. Mikey would lead meditations every single morning and every single night. And for him, um, because he lived that lifestyle, it was never a chore. It was not difficult.
Yeah, but
And so because he didn't have, like, I'm just saying that sans the distractions of the modern life, I don't think meditation would probably be difficult.
perhaps it would definitely be less difficult, but you have a meditation leader, you have somebody who's charged with keeping time in a sense, keeping things in order, because one of the most meditation is about disregarding invasive thoughts, redirecting your attention to your breath, to something, to sensation of the body, something like that. One of the most invasive thoughts you experience is, do I need to attend to some other matter because some amount of time has passed, right? And that's all I'm saying there.
Yeah, but before you have a concept of time, and when time is fluid and it's not chopped up, then I think that you're just sitting there and you go, well, I ate and I'm in a safe place. So that's it.
Yeah,
Like, yeah, I don't think you're worried
without
about answering emails or
right.
checking Twitter.
Without things to urgently attend
Yeah.
to, meditation is more fluid. Maybe to go back to
Yeah.
our earliest metaphor, natural time has this fluidity to it because it's not chopped up into pieces by tasks you need to attend to. And so after talking about Babylonians making time quantifiable, Brady kind of moves on, talks about this idea of networked time. And that's kind of into the modern era now where we have clocks, but every town maybe sets their clock to the noon of that town. So a town 15 miles over has a slightly different noon, a town 30 miles slightly different. But network time, then we get the telegraph. We're able to coordinate across vast distances because we can communicate at great speeds and say, no, we're going to go by the time at this observatory, and it will communicate outward to others. So this is we read quite some time ago, Lynn Alden's Broken Money, and she marks a turning point with the like kind of the invention of speed.
Yeah.
Speed is kind of not formally invented, but it's innovated when we get the telegraph, and that collapses space in a very important way.
It's maybe not necessarily so much innovated as realized to be an integral part of commerce, because
Mhm.
the telegraph separated the speed of commerce from the speed of settlement, which previously had always been harmoniously intertwined.
Yeah, and in Alden's accounting too, time or speed was a centralizing force because when you have network time, then you get consolidated time zones. There's not a patchwork of different times.
Yeah.
It becomes, and then that network becomes global at a certain point. Swenson notes you have atomic clocks, you have GPS, we have the ability to have the world becomes one clock or on one sort of time dictated by a mechanism we can all refer to that communicates to us at the speed of light.
Yeah. And it's centralizing in a way, right?
Yeah.
And it's beneficial to humanity and civilization because it enables organization. I think about the, the patchwork of different times in different towns. He notes that at one time there was like at least 144 different times. I don't know if he was referring just in the United States or across the
Right.
world, but that's a lot.
Yeah.
Um, but it makes me think of like the period of wildcat banks where it was everybody had their own bank, and there was a bank here and there's a bank here and there's a bank there, and everybody was just doing their own thing, and they were disconnected. And wow, that so there's good and there's bad to centralization. The good is that you can do things fast. The bad is that when it fails, everything fails.
Yeah.
Flip side, on the decentralized, the Wildcat Bank, the Wildcat time side is that when one bank fails, not all the rest of
Right.
them do.
Yeah.
In this town, when whatever Johnny forgets to ring the bell at noon or something like that, and everybody's screwed up for the rest of the day, it's just that town and it's just that day.
Yeah. And
So,
one interesting part of Alden's account was that that the telegraph and the centralization of time enables fiat, and it's almost good story, or it's a story of technological progress. Before, like, you'd have to carry your gold with you everywhere, and commerce could only move at like the speed of a horse or whatever. And after that, and so like when we get the telegraph, gold centralizes in banks and they can communicate quickly amongst themselves. What you mentioned though is you mentioned earlier just about civilization, and here's a quote from Swenson that kind of moves us in, I think, the next part of his talk, and really the overall point of his talk. New clocks don't just tell time, they fundamentally reorganize work, coordination, and the entire tempo of civilization. So we saw moving from natural time to Babylonian quantification of time to networked and centralized time. Um, Within that dynamic, you have different civilizations that are rising, and the tempo of life in those civilizations, the cadence, as Swenson says, is different for each of those civilizations. Um, you have natural rhythms, then you have mechanical rhythms, then you have once you have mechanical rhythm, it becomes kind of accelerating. That's machines become faster and communicate at the speed of light, and so the tempos of civilizations change too.
Yeah, you think about having you would have a conversation. You and I would live in different towns, and we would have a conversation whenever you visited my town.
Yeah,
And you know, interestingly enough, though, you would really make an effort. If you came to my town, you would really make an effort to come see me, because that would be the only time that we could. It wouldn't be like, oh, I'm in a hurry. I
yeah,
got to get back. Right. And then after that, we got the letters, and okay, so we could communicate a little faster, speed of a horse, speed of somebody walking on foot to start with, and then a horse and then a train. And then the electric age, the digital age, the speed of the telegraph, the speed of the email. And I think if you read older books and you read the things that people wrote about each other, it's very clear that there seems to be an inverse relationship between the speed at which you're able to communicate and the depth at which the relationship ultimately can go.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
you just have deeper relationships because that everything goes back to scarcity. That opportunity to communicate is so much more scarce.
yeah. And when you wanted to communicate face to face, um, it was an approximate affair. You couldn't say, "I'll meet you at 3:35." You would say, "I'll meet you in late afternoon," or
Yeah.
something, or some other way when the sun is at such and such point.
Yep.
And so, like, coordination was approximate. And you could imagine, I would imagine, again, yeah, that would change the nature of the eventual face-to-face contact you would have too, because it wouldn't be so regimented. You would arrive maybe 10, 15, half an hour early than the person, and you wouldn't worry about that. You would arrive and be there and be like, "Oh, I have to wait. This is just the way it is. It's approximate."
And you wouldn't know probably that you were 10,
Yeah,
15.
exactly.
You
Yeah.
would
There
just be
wouldn't,
like,
yeah,
oh, they're not here yet.
right.
Um, Another thing, when you mentioned like the proximate nature of it, is just like you and I sitting here, we both have energy. We both are giving off some sort of energy field. We are both, this used to be woo woo, but it's not anymore. It's a very recognized science now that we operate at a certain frequency. And when you're in proximity with another person, when you're face to face with that person, then you have a far different experience. There is uh, a sinking, I
There is
guess, or,
definitely. Yeah, breathing, we probably take on another's breathing. Somebody near you is hyped up, and
yeah,
you're gonna not only feel maybe the hormones that are, like the adrenaline or something like that, smell that coming out in their sweat, but also their quickened breathing is probably gonna quicken your breathing, and you need to slow things down sometimes to be able to communicate.
yeah. And you don't know that when you're writing a letter, and you
Right.
don't know that when you're maybe a little bit when you're on the phone, but you don't really know that when you're posting on your Facebook
Yeah.
wall or stuff like
But
that.
in that biological notion of syncing time, probably very important in the past. If someone comes running up because there's a tiger there, you need to sync up very quick on
Yeah.
your internal clocks to deal with the tiger. So up to this point, to kind of recap where we've gotten so far in the talk, first there's natural time, the rhythm of the earth and the sky, sundials and calendars, patient cyclical time, very humane in a sense because it's very human scale. Cyclical in the sense that it's like tied to seasons and tides and the stars as they go around the earth, tied to nature. That's natural time. And then machine time, we saw the advent of that and so far in the progression of this talk. Machine time, the rhythm of industry and computation too, chronometers, atomic clocks. The tempo is very precise. The Babylonians chop it up, and now we've chopped it up even more and measured it. And we saw too that machine time accelerates with technology. Natural time is pegged at nature and it's human in that sense. Machine time can escape the human. I think about another thing that Land said that I thought was incredibly fascinating. There's more time at the bottom. When
Yeah.
you're a machine,
Yeah.
if you can kind of compute more and more quickly, then you can slow time down because you can get more done in that same amount of time. And there's more time at the bottom, is just to say, once you begin to do 40,000 computations a second or 60,000, 100,000, whatever that means, then you move more towards the bottom of like the very bottom of time. Land says is like the time it takes a photon to move a Planck's length or something like that. And you can imagine if you can approach thinking at that time, it's vastly accelerated for humans because we can't approach that even if machines can.
Yeah.
They can move towards the bottom and we can't. We're stuck.
This is where we start to make consistently one of the most fatal errors of humans, which is to believe that if some is good, more is better. Which is to say that if I can do this amount of work in 2 hours and you can do it in 1 hour and the work is equivalent,
Yeah.
then you're better. But that's not better. Only better is better. And so we stop looking at how to improve and innovate, and we only focus on the iteration, which is, I think, why that's, that I'm certainly not alone in saying this. And it wasn't an original idea of mine, just an observation that I had from reading and listening to other people. But the 20th century, and in a lot of ways, most of the 21st as well, has been lacking in innovation and has been almost wholly defined by iteration. The car was invented 125 years ago or so, and we still got cars, 4 wheels and a steering wheel.
Yeah. Do we though? We have a thing that is almost unrecognizable compared to the early car, I would say.
It's better, but it's not different. It's just innovated, or sorry, it's just iterated. But
they're so vastly different.
But no, they're not different. They're the exact same thing. There's 4 wheels, there's an engine, there's doors, there's windows.
You live a
radio.
different life if you have
a
car
better radio, you have a
1940s.
more comfortable seat, you have faster car, it's more safe, but nothing about it is teleportation.
But it's moving
And nothing
towards...
about it is it's not a flying car.
But flying cars are less impressive than autonomous cars.
I disagree.
To talk about Jonathan, like we talked with not Jonathan Kirkwoods, it was Booth, right? Like once you have fully autonomous cars, then the nature of life changes because you can let your car out as part of a taxi fleet when you're not using it, can drive around. We only need 1 car for every 5 households, things like that. Things change.
A fully autonomous car is nothing more than a horse that's trained better than the rider. It's just the horse that knows where to go. It's not the next step.
Maybe if we had horses like that, that would be a phenomenal innovation on horses too.
I mean, we do have horses like that.
A horse that can like
little pony rides that you
let it out of the stable at night. It runs around, helps somebody else, comes back, powers your house when your personal solar grid in your house is down, use its backup battery. But in any case, natural time, machine time. There's this third notion of time that Brady brings into this. Bridging nature and machine, that's Bitcoin. So that's Gigi kind of has this notion of creating time in digital space. And then Brady notes that you're bringing nature into the digital realm through proof of work. He calls it's a good metaphor, a sundial in cyberspace. The sundial is nature. That's powered by the sun, right? Cyberspace is obviously a machine, technological innovation. So a sundial in cyberspace. Bitcoin weds nature and machine to bridge the two notions of time together in the form of Tock next block, powered by computation, which is work, which is time and energy, real world energy, making machine time something that doesn't constantly accelerate, but is pegged to the 10 minutes that is legible to humans.
Nothing to add.
Nothing to add.
Yeah.
Um, Natural time keeps us human. Machine time drives us forward. Bitcoin time bridges the two. So if clocks define our temporal landscape, again, the point of Brady's talk is to get us to think about what this means for the cadence of civilization. If the nature of the clock of a particular civilization defines the cadence of life, the tempo of life, what does that mean for life when Bitcoin bridges the two? How does life change when the tempo changes?
Yeah. So we can bring in a little land here. I think if natural time keeps us human and machine time pushes us forward, Bitcoin time pushes us forward, Bitcoin, bridging the two. Well, what should that mean? That should mean if we take Nick Land at his theory, and we accept that Bitcoin is the escape valve through which AI and robotics will take capitalism into autonomous capital
Yeah.
and do all the work. So Bitcoin, AI, and robotics will do all the work to push us forward. And then we should be able to return to human time. We should be able to return to natural time.
Yeah.
One would hope.
Yeah. This wasn't necessary. I almost saw this as a contradiction in Land, or something that Land needed to resolve that Brady's bringing to the forefront, and that so Land is describing a notion of capital as acceleration, as
Mhm.
there's a dynamic in it where it's always moving into the future at an accelerating rate. Land defines it in the terms of intelligence optimization, I think, with
Mhm.
AI being the form that capital will kind of push towards.
The form of intelligence.
Yeah, but in any case, capital accelerating, but then even on Land's notion, Bitcoin as a zombie, as an eternal thing, there's a slowness to that even in Land's accounting for what Bitcoin is. So if capital accelerates but Bitcoin does not, if it stays the same, what does that do to, how do those two mix, accelerationism and the slowness of Bitcoin? And I think that's kind of what Brady's talking about here.
I think we need to distinguish like what accelerationism is, because it's not the capital being useful, I think, or capital perfecting itself is kind of, I think, what Land is talking about when he talks about acceleration. And I think that can coexist with the idea of Bitcoin being unchanged, because Bitcoin is just part of the thing that makes that capital work. And when he talks about perfecting, autonomous capital, well, if you perfect something, then that means that the components of it would be unchanged, right? So,
Or that it's constantly improving on itself. I don't know that there's perfection, but there's like an asymptotic,
I mean,
like
perfection means you're not going to change anything.
if you arrive at a
It's
perfect
perfect.
state. Yeah.
Don't change a thing. That's
Right.
literally what people say.
Yeah. I think accelerationism is not about perfection, but about constant improvement at an ever increasing rate. Yeah.
And yeah, an asymptotic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in any case, so acceleration, Brady would agree, and I think Lamb would agree too, maybe, that acceleration, the fiat monetary system has a relationship to acceleration, that
Yes.
it is instant, untethered digital creation. It can increase just as fast. And maybe that's kind of what Booth is talking about, that's why it kind of counters deflation with technology, because it keeps on bringing the future into the present
Exactly.
through printing more money.
And that must be why time feels like it's passing so fast, because we're not just living this moment. We're
Yeah.
living all of the future time that we've pulled into the present
Yes.
through death.
Right.
And so we're living the next 30 years or in the case of a government debt, the next 300 years
Right.
at any given second. And
Yeah.
so that would make sense for why we feel as though time passes faster and faster as we move further about towards the end of yet another fiat experiment.
Yeah.
Fiat experiment's interesting because it's one of those experiments that people you brought up the other day, the replication crisis. I think that's what it's
Within
called
the humanity, or not within
within
science.
science.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, science is science. Science just studies stuff. I mean, study your Diet Coke. It can study this table. It can study the air. It can also study fiat. And there's no replication problem with fiat experiments. They all turn out the same way. Like
Yeah.
they all end, and they all go to hell. And the money is no longer worthless, and maybe it's kept around in a museum or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah. So, and this, how this kind of catches on to us, the instability of accelerating fiat as it keeps pace with technology, is something the human experience of that Brady calls quiet coercion.
yeah,
Yeah, that's the um, erosion of our human scale of time as we see machine time accelerating and money accelerating with it, and money being the way that we try to freeze time into units so that we can capture value in them and store them.
hmm
And so is that combination is unstable, essentially. Fiat money and a machine time that keeps on accelerating, giving way to the quiet coercion that operates on all of us when. And just to get into it, this is what the kind of the core of Brady's talk, the cadence of civilization is a quiet coercion on us right now. How we no longer have long-term projects.
yeah,
We no longer do things to prepare for the future. Time pressing future time into the present, because capital cannot rest.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it can't rest because if it were to rest, then it would disintegrate. It would fall apart
Yeah.
because if you let your capital, which is decaying at a rate of 12% a year, if you let it sit, then in a decade you have effectively nothing. I
Yeah.
mean, you've lost about 70% So yeah, so you can't rest,
Yeah.
which forces you to continually chase short-term profits, which I've said on here before, that pushes you in the direction of iteration and away from innovation because innovation is unknown. We don't know how long it's going to take to figure out teleportation. We do know it's going to be better than a car, but you can't put a quarterly earnings report on that.
Yeah.
And so what do? We just keep making a better car because you can put a quarterly earnings report on that. And so we get stuck in this. One of Elon's rules is, a good engineer should never optimize something that shouldn't exist. And he says the most common mistake that all engineers make is to optimize something that shouldn't exist. And there's a lot of technologies that we have around today that probably shouldn't exist because we stopped thinking about how to do things differently and we only thought about how to do them better.
Quicker. Yeah.
Yeah.
Things became disposable. Instead of repairing, we just got rid of.
The
We
plastic
Plastic
generation.
furniture,
Yeah.
yeah, things like that. And I really like the terms that Brady uses throughout this. Quiet coercion is good. Restless capital too. Like that's the notion of capital we have.
Yeah.
Restless capital can't sit still. It's agitating because it's melting. It's the ice cube. It's got to keep on moving or else it's going to melt away. Something
It's
like that.
tweaking.
It's tweaking.
It
Yeah,
needs another hit, man.
another stim,
Yeah.
another Keynesian stimulus.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Just
Um,
give me just a little stimmy, just a little
yeah.
stimmy.
So you have restless capital, but Bitcoin bridges and changes because Bitcoin can sit still. You don't have to find the next form of capital to improve on your returns. You can sit still. You can put your money into Bitcoin, hold the Bitcoin, and then sit still and do something else. It's not everybody's an investor, everybody's finding the next meme coin or meme stock or trying to prophesy the next trend. You don't have to do that. You can dedicate your mental energy, your physical time to something else. Put your money in Bitcoin, let it sit and do something else. The capital sits still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It gives you opportunity to innovate because you have a new hurdle rate, and your hurdle rate is now Bitcoin
Yeah.
instead of cash or fiat. And the reason why fiat is restless is because its hurdle rate is much lower than the hurdle rate of other things, real estate, collectibles, wine, horses, race horses, fancy cars, whatever
Yeah.
these things that, because they do have some scarcity, or at least relative scarcity, they can, until the bubble bursts on them, they can outperform and therefore have a higher hurdle rate than the fiat. But because there's nothing more scarce than Bitcoin, it just inevitably will have a higher hurdle rate, and therefore you just won't do things unless they're worth doing,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah. The end result of restless capital is you move towards speed and short-termism.
Yeah.
Yeah. The instant becomes the default expectation, and this is we were talking about this before too. Mm, e this is the cadence of civilization point. This is that there's a psychological result that comes from our timekeeping mechanism. If we keep time according to the pace of technology and restless capital, then it socializes impatience.
Yeah, I love that term,
Yeah.
socialized impatience,
Why do you love that term?
because it's a more clever way of saying instant gratification. And I think it more accurately explains the phenomenon that we're experiencing, because the instant gratification doesn't necessarily give me the impression that it applies to everyone,
Mhm.
but socialized impatience,
Yeah.
that does. That explains why we all have the same kind of undercurrent of anxiety. We all have the same impatience. We all have the same lack of ability to focus on long-term projects, and accelerating, getting worse, and forgetting that we actually, if you're our age, that you actually did grow up in a world that didn't have that, at least nowhere near to the extent that we do today. And so, yeah, I've never heard anybody use that term. So TikTok next block and socialized impatience.
Yeah, and the
Credit to
socialized
Brady.
impatience too, as we were talking about before, it also is a humane way to describe it because, it makes it general and acknowledges that to a certain extent it's outside of our control.
Yeah.
If people can you can feel bad if you think that it's my fault, wholly my fault, that I can't pay attention, I can't sit still, I can't plan for the future. And of course we should retain personal agency with regard to that. We can plan for the future regardless of the tempo of civilization. But it's also good to note that no, this is a more general problem. We're all dealing with it. It is due to
It's environmental.
yeah,
It's the science of habit formation says that if you want to change a habit, that you'll die trying to change it in the face of living in the same environment that you created that habit. And so for that reason, when you serve time in a penitentiary and they release you, they say, don't go home, because home is what got you here. But whatever home was, go find a different one. When you get out of treatment, if you're in like alcohol or drug treatment, don't go back to your friends, because those are the friends that got you here.
yeah,
Um, you have to remove those stimuli from your environment, because it's not a question of willpower. It's a question of environmental availability. And if it's there, you're going to use it, and you're going to become subject to it, especially in this age when the technology that we use is truly weaponized in order to capture attention, in order to drive
yeah,
you to more of that short-term gratification, because that is valuable short term for the companies that are doing it. I think one of the things we'll see when we look back on this age 20 to 30 years from now, hopefully we're completely out of this by now. And I think we're moving. You see signs of that. You see signs of people moving away from that and voluntarily disengaging from these technologies that have just ravished their ability to focus and their ability to form deep relationships and do things. But yeah, I think we're going to look back at a lot of these behemoth companies, Netflix and TikTok and Facebook, and we're gonna say, "We're not quite sure how much good they did for us,"
Yeah.
you know? Uh,
Yeah. Um, this restless capital then socializing impatience and these technological trends that, I mean, you give name to them in the form of companies, what they're inhibiting or preventing are very practical things, very real things. Things like Brady notes, mastering a skill, building a family, saving, pursuing a long-term project, um,
apprenticeship.
apprenticeship,
Yeah.
yeah, childhood, topsoil. We were talking about that. It's such a great analogy because topsoil, if you don't have the right agricultural practices, if you cut down all the trees, something like that, you can lose the topsoil in one season that took generations to accumulate with
It's
its fertility. Yeah.
yeah, it's such a great analogy because we live in an extraction economy,
Yes.
where
You
we're
need to
extracting.
extract because capital's restless. You need to
Yeah,
get it
you
now.
have to.
Yeah.
And because of the way now it's changing, regenerative, practices are becoming much more popular. And I did my graduate work on some of those practices, and they truly are incredible. But agriculture is itself an extractive process. What you do is you have land and you are extracting water, minerals, and nutrients in the form of whatever crop that you're taking off of it. And so as we have accelerated our desire to maximize yield, and we have to maximize yield because the prices haven't changed.
Yeah.
Wheat is effectively the same price per bushel today as it was 60 years ago. So you have to maximize the yield because all of your inputs have gone up, your fertilizer and your land and your diesel and your tractor, all of these things, they've all accelerated. And so what we end up doing is every single year we take off all of these things and then we go buy them in a different form, our nitrogen, our phosphorus, or our um, potassium and our micronutrients, and we put them back on. And then we plant, we take them off again. Yeah. And so we don't give the soil a chance to heal itself, or,
Yeah.
and we take more than it can give us, and
Yeah.
retain health. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he mentions forests here too. This is maybe not what he was getting at, but we are talking about this also before we hit record. One of the most beautiful things I think is when an older person plants a tree
Yeah.
because they're making a definite statement that it's worth engaging in a long-term project that they're not going to see the fruits of, which is so like it's heretical to our culture now that you would do anything other than harvest everything from the future for yourself. To see somebody plant a tree because they think 20 years, 30 years, someone in their 80s plants a tree, they're not going to see that.
No.
But doing that is it's such a beautiful statement of there are values that the tempo, the cadence of our civilization is not going to justify. If you're not doing it for the carbon credit, you're doing it for like some sort of credit to accrue to the future.
Yeah. The tree moving economy has exploded. You move to a new place and, oh, I want some trees. I'm not going to wait 15,
Yeah,
20 years. I'm
why wait for a tree to
just going to
grow?
buy
I
something.
need it now. I
Yeah.
need instant gratification. I need nature to conform to the tempo that we're imposing on it
Yeah.
instead of us conforming vice versa.
And you're taking somebody else's proof of work and calling it your own.
Yeah. Yeah. And then at this point, we kind of talked about this before. Brady does talk about Bitcoin, how it does bridge Satoshi solving the problem of machine time. Gigi talked about this in Bitcoin is time. Bitcoin being a time chain, Bitcoin being originally conceived as a peer-to-peer distributed timestamp server. Like the notion of time was always in the forefront of
Yeah.
what needed to happen with Bitcoin. And so Bitcoin, Brady notes, reprices time. It's hopefully going to get us back if capital is not restless, if it can sit still to where we do want to plant a tree because we have the time to. We're not infatuated with doing something else with our time in order to preserve our capital. We have our capital, and we can act ethically and act towards the future that is not ours because we're not trying to steal it through debt, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you have that lower time preference and you're looking at the future and not only looking at the future, but you're just believing that you have a future. So
Yeah.
many people today genuinely don't believe that
You're
they
never
have a
gonna have a
future.
house. You're never gonna
Yeah.
have a job that's gonna pay you enough to have what the previous generation had. Yeah.
Yep. Never gonna have a family, never gonna have exactly. And so if you're not gonna have those things, then why do that? Why clean your gutters?
Yeah.
Why paint your house? Why plant a tree? Why eat healthy? Why go to sleep at a good time? Why do any of these things? Because you don't foresee a future. And I think for anybody who feels that way, go listen to Jeff Booth talk and you'll get some optimism for the future. Or go listen to Michael Saylor talk or Jack Mallers or somebody like that. But nobody deep into Bitcoin is we note this all the time. Like you go to a Bitcoin conference, you hang out with Bitcoiners, they're the healthiest, happiest people I've ever seen in my entire life, except when the price action's bad.
Yeah.
But regardless, they're fit, they're making babies,
Yeah.
they're making plans, they're
Yep.
doing big things.
Yeah. One of the parts here I wanted to also kind of highlight was the notion of mastering a skill, because that notion is also being robbed from us through, at least for me, the psychological effect of contemplating the acceleration of AI and its capacities. I learned Spanish 6, 7 years ago, and it was so delightful to do, but my time frame was different then. I didn't have the notion that all language capacity is gonna be taken over by AI. It seemed worth doing at the time. I knew I was gonna have to invest a couple years, some amount of time into doing it, and then in the past couple years, tried to learn French, and it's a little bit more difficult, but the real difficulty was the psychological realization or feeling that what's the worth of this? I needed to nominate it to myself in some sort of monetary worth first because of the notion of restless capital. We need to be doing things that I don't have the capital in
Or
the bank.
maximizing your earning potential in the
Something like,
moment.
yeah,
Yeah.
in the moment, right? Doing everything in the moment to maximize value because you don't conceive of value being preserved. Um, but being able to have the ability to sit still like Bitcoin does and to take that time to master a skill, knowing that you don't need to denominate it in the instant. It can be something that's goes beyond that. Yeah.
This is a huge question because it takes us back. I really think it takes us back to childhood and doing things for the sake of doing things. That's what a child does. They
Yeah.
they do things just because they enjoy them. And they're they don't care that they're not the best at it. They delight when they get better.
Yeah.
They experience, the growth in incremental steps that we are often looking for some monumental improvement in order to justify our continued expenditure of time and capital and calories and such towards
Yeah.
something. So I think this is the huge existential question of our time, which is when you don't have to do anything, what will you choose to do? And do you want to just try to do everything shallow? Do you want to just try to do everything poorly and just experience everything? Or do you want to truly dig in on just a couple things and make those choices that, as Thomas Sowell says, there are no trade offs or there are no choices in life, only trade offs. You're making these trade offs.
Yeah.
Um, so
No, and that notion that childhood is devoured by the cadence of civilization, it's interesting too because childhood for the primate that we are is this extended biological stage of dependence.
Yeah.
And it is something that you can't biologically shorten. So when we try to shorten it because we feel we need to, because the tempo of civilization is picking up, then childhood disappears. And maybe
Yeah.
some, maybe one way to put it is in an inadequate way, but we'll begin to quantify childhood even, or think about how it can be monetized or how we can monetize the experiences of childhood.
Hmm.
Um, maybe this isn't a perfect analogy to it, but like with the OnlyFans thing, when someone's in the bloom of their young beauty, now the thought is, how can I make this into capital, right? How
Yeah.
can I sell this? Instead of thinking, no, my sexuality is part of a long-term project of starting a family that has a value that I don't need to pull all that value from the future and cash out while I'm beautiful or something like that.
Yeah.
You can instead deploy it in a natural rhythm.
Yeah. Enjoying that beauty for what it is, as opposed to commoditizing and
Yeah.
commercializing it, and yeah,
Yeah.
extracting it in that sense. It,
Yeah.
yeah, you think about, like, you know, you got an 8-year-old and they're really interested in gymnastics and they're getting better and better. And, you and we would probably do this out of the goodness of our heart. We'd be, well, she's really good. Let's start a TikTok account and let's show the world, she's fascinating. And then it becomes less about the craft and more about the views, or it becomes more about optimizing the craft for the views,
Yeah.
for the attention.
Yeah.
When that, like, the beauty of watching somebody play a sport is that you see you see the joy on their face when they play that sport, and you recognize that they're doing this because they love it. Music's the same way. Of course, there's a lot of things like this, law and baking and painting and fixing cars and all of these things. Like, there are people that you talk to them about why they do what they do, and they say, "Well, I do it because I like it. I do it because I would do it if nobody paid me, because I enjoy it." So,
Yeah. And that's sports an interesting one. This is also an imperfect analogy, but I was watching a football game and there's this fellow, is Archie Manning or
March.
Arch Manning. So he's making something like $6 million, right, as
Okay.
a college
Yeah.
athlete. And so instead of, and this isn't to blame him or even to say that it's not the right thing to do given the current system, because somebody was making the money before
Exactly.
and now we're at least giving it to maybe the college athletes. But it's also something where you now watch a college game and you're not watching like the development of virtue of the future generation by participating in a difficult activity under stress through teamwork. You're watching somebody who is like, yeah, they're doing a job. This is a
Yep.
job that he has, and
Yep.
he's making a bunch of money, and that's, it's part of the economy. So
Yeah.
everything becomes the Babylonians screwed us all over by quantifying time, and it's only, you know, maybe a matter of time since then that we arrived at the current moment where until we pull back from that quantification, slow it down, that we're gonna end up where we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it has an effect on the integrity. And again, like, I completely resonate with what you say. Like, this is not judging the athletes or anything. In this specific example, like, the NCAA makes billions of
Right.
dollars off
Yeah.
of students,
Yeah.
and until this point had really not given them hardly anything in return.
Not even an
Oh,
education
we're
given the
giving,
college
yeah, you
system.
don't, yeah, that's the thing. It used to be that maybe you got an education. Now you don't even get an education. You just get a diploma,
Yeah.
and those are two different things. Um, but you see the end of the football season, which we're in. You're going to have conference championship games, and you're going to have bowl games, or the college football championship. And what you're going to see now is you're going to see a ton of those kids not playing, They're just going to voluntarily remove themselves because their season, as far as they're concerned, is over. Because they put in their time, they got paid, and any further would risk injury and stuff like that. And so, this used to not be so much a problem. It used to be, oh, you'd have, maybe 2 or 3 guys that might go really, really high in the draft that
Yeah.
were sitting out. And even that was super controversial. But now it's like, I think K-State played Alabama a couple years ago, or like right after the NIL came. I'm not sure if this is right, but whoever they played, and the other team had like 20 some guys sitting out. They're like, yep, we're good. And so, yeah, it does put in a price tag on things, does kind of sully the integrity of it for sure.
Yeah, and so you mentioned music too, you were going there, and that's where, Brady also goes. He says, "Culture thickens when time slows, when you bridge natural and machine time through something like Bitcoin, through capital that can sit still, culture thickens." You get, the return of arts, festival, and music that can maybe be tied so much of our entertainment is, a representation of instant gratification. Even in the aesthetics of it, there's a certain aesthetics to fiat, which is real flashy and sexy and fast, and it's different than, maybe the aesthetics of something like Bitcoin that is not about showy displays of
Mhm.
wealth, conspicuous consumption, but almost about conspicuous saving.
Yeah.
That's the Bitcoin, like what we loud is, oh my gosh, you saved up and got a whole Bitcoin through hours of effort, through days and years of meticulous saving. Like that's
Mhm.
the aesthetics.
But you think about a modern music concert, some big name, Taylor Swift or Pink or Lady Gaga or somebody like that. They may have a half dozen, a dozen costume changes during
Oh
a
yeah.
concert,
Only way to keep our attention.
right?
Yeah.
But previously, it's like those the one thing that artist wore became iconic,
Yeah.
right? Johnny Cash, the Man in Black,
So I
right?
wanna get your thoughts on this. The
Elvis with
one of the
his
so
velour suit.
short form content is what everybody's moving to because that's where the attention is. That's how you get your thing out there. And you're doing that now too with your music
Trying, yeah,
on TikTok.
yeah,
Like you've done some really interesting things in the past with your music. When you were up in Washington, you came at your music through community, going to an open mic and trying to foster amongst the people there a notion that we're going to come back every one night a week and we're all going to play a song, improve, and make this a communal effort. Whereas now, um, you know, what you have to do is if you want to get the views, is put together some sort of short form content.
yeah. Although I did just recently discover TikTok Studio, which means that now I'm aware that I can just do live and go
Nice.
like there's there'll people that they'll play 4 hours,
Yeah.
and they'll and that what I noticed in there, I scrolled through a couple and I was reading some of the comments, and what you have are repeat offenders. You have people that are coming back to the same person. They're
Nice.
thickening that relationship.
Yeah.
They're forging a relationship. And so, yeah, that's the direction that I think is far more valuable than, fighting, what do they call it? The 200 view jail that TikTok puts you in.
200 views is not bad. I know, man, we were on a fourth tier of podcast. I'm not gonna argue 200 views.
That's right. We're three and a half, third and a half tier. We're
Yeah,
trying to step up higher.
that's right.
Yeah, lifting the leg.
But it is, I do think like 200 views. Imagine yourself sitting in a room, and there's 200 people that
I
around the
know.
world who
Right.
think something you do is of value. That's good enough.
Yeah.
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 And if you don't have to monetize and quantify it in that way, it is enough. It is enough to talk to 200 people.
I've played a lot of shows for less than 10 people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So slower time thickens culture. It also, Brady says, has an effect on our morality. We've kind of touched on that throughout this planting a tree. Conscience requires time. You need a spacious time horizon, Brady Sweat says, to act ethically. If you have low time preference, I mean, our prisons are full of people with is it low or high time
High,
preference? I
high
always
time preference.
yeah, they want the marshmallow now, the
Yep.
famous marshmallow experiment. Put a kid in a room, say, I'm gonna leave the room as a marshmallow here. If you don't eat it, when I come back, I'll give you 2 marshmallows. You know, a certain subset of population just gobbles up the marshmallow, and some are able to gut it out for 2 marshmallows. And that's kind of really the wellspring of ethics is the ability to wait for later value and postpone, and it becomes even abstract when the value becomes something that a future generation is going to have. The 2 marshmallows is something my child is gonna have or my grandchildren. It's not even something I'm gonna eat.
Yeah. I like a good marshmallow that's been left out for a while
Marshmallows are
anyways.
gross.
They
No
are
one
gross.
actually wants marshmallows. This is
Come on.
obviously an old experiment when kids had nothing better than marshmallows.
Peeps, man. Yeah,
Not even
it's an
Peeps.
Easter tradition.
Yeah, that's
You
the only reason
gotta you
anybody
gotta
eats.
have one to remind yourself of how disgusting they are, and then you come back next year.
You have the cookie dough caramel, just
Oh, the
monstrosity.
Cadbury egg?
Whatever, just like the concoctions they make nowadays that are heroin in sugar form.
Yes.
Yeah.
I learned today that heroin was created as a alternative to get people off of methamphetamine addiction.
So you do, then you make something to
Like,
get people off heroin. You just keep on going deeper into the hole.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was advertised as a way to get you off of amphetamines and also a cough suppressant.
Wow.
Just
Just
like,
yeah, dual acting
I
agent.
guess you can't cough when your vocal cords are so relaxed that they're like honey.
Nice. Yeah. So maybe we become more moral to when Bitcoin bridges natural and machine time, capital is not restless, and we can act for a future that we believe will actually someday come instead of collapsing that future into the moment. So,
I think we have. I mean, I can't imagine. What have we done now? So we've done 50 some podcasts. So we've done well over 100 hours
yeah.
of recorded content. And then for every hour that we record, we probably spend 5 to 10 at least.
Easily. With the
Easily.
Zeno systems, man, I read that for like 3
Yeah.
weeks, putting in 2 hours a day, not putting in, enjoying it and enriching myself, but a lot of time
Yeah.
goes into each of
So
these.
figure 2,000 hours. Like we
Yeah.
put in like a work year worth
Oh,
of
yeah.
work on this in less than, or in right at a year.
Yeah.
And I just can't imagine, I can't imagine doing that with something that didn't yield fruit, you know? And the fruit is that we've talked about this. Like, yeah, we're a fourth year podcast. Thanks you guys for listening, both of you. We really appreciate it. We're working on the lighting. We're working on the sound. We're going to make it better. There's nothing we can do
About
about how we look.
that's right.
And
Yeah.
we keep
There's
trying.
certain hard caps.
Grant keeps asking me to make him more handsome. And I'm like, man,
Work with it.
want to put so much lipstick on a pig, man.
That's right.
But whether or not this moves up and gets to be a bigger podcast, we're going to continue having these conversations because this is what's enjoyable.
Yes.
This is the part
It
that's
was always the
enjoyable.
goal. That was
The
always the goal.
learning was
Yeah.
enjoyable, and it gives you a sense of peace as you walk around during the day, and it gives you a sense of purpose and knowing that if no one listens to this, we still had a good conversation. We shared space with each other. We
I don't like the phrase share space, but continue.
all right.
It's such a
Whatever
hokey phrase.
It is a hokey phrase. What do you want to say? We sat in the same room
Yeah.
and didn't. We sat in the same room and had a conversation. We weren't staring at a screen
An
or
extended
separate
conversation without
screens.
interruptions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we held a thought.
We did.
You've talked about this a lot, you know,
Yeah.
the idea of a 10-minute thought.
That's one of the cool things about TikTok next block too, is just 10 minutes is such a good time frame for an extended mental concoction too. Like all of our thoughts, you know, it's like 7 or 10 seconds is the attention span, right? And something
Yeah.
like that. And then if you can hold a thought for 10 minutes, what a cathedral of a thought you can build because you can layer it, you can add to it, you can do interesting things, make it intricate and beautiful. Whereas if you move from, I mean, that's the true horror of short form content is you don't remember any of the various things you've seen,
Yep.
even if you have while you're watching it, the sensation of experience, it is not experience because it's gone. It's like it's a void.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the terrifying thing, if you ever like, so I would sometimes get on YouTube Shorts,
Yeah.
and I would look at those, and then I would be like, oh wait, there was a podcast I was listening to on YouTube, and I want to go back and
Yeah.
find it. So I'd go into my history, and I start scrolling through. I'm like, oh, it was just like an hour ago that I was watching that podcast, and it's like you went through like 300 shorts
Yeah.
and you're like, all I did was poop.
Hmm.
It wasn't that much. Wasn't
No,
that good of a
the
poop.
typical time for a bowel movement has gone up exponentially too, because we can put so much content into. We can't even defecate without the crutch of a cell phone there. You sit down without a cell phone and there's like this existential
Yeah.
horror of like, what am I going to do for the next minute and a half?
Yeah.
Like I'm left alone with my thoughts.
I, for one, am a fan of more time on the pot, but
Yeah.
it's just because I enjoy
But
it.
it's not time it's not time you enjoy
This
though.
is true. Yeah.
It's time again that is 10 minutes, but it passes as if it's 10 seconds.
And I would say that, like Elon's stated goal with X is to make it like enjoyable time or valuable time. And even if they are making an honest effort in moving in that direction, I think we've seen that it's just damn near impossible. Like, 'cause
I was actually
it doesn't feel better to
yeah,
me.
as Twitter has gotten worse, I've enjoyed it more because it's almost like you look at it for a while now, you're like, I can't. I'm done.
Yeah.
So it's like as Twitter gets worse, it gets better. I think it's part of Elon's long game to like create something that seems enjoyable and valuable, but when you do it, you're not going to get stuck in it. So like
I hope so.
I can't.
There is
anymore.
I will say that there is a genuine feeling now of, and I think X is the only social media platform that I would say this about, but you're absolutely right in that you get on it and you're like, in about like 5 minutes, you're like, I gotta fucking do something.
Yeah.
Like, it's not this like 3 hour, 2 hour,
Yeah.
45-minute thing. You're like, you see like one thing and then you're like, nope, the rest of this is shit. I'm out.
Yeah. So to put a point on it, or to conclude at least with Brady's talk here, Bitcoin won't build utopia, but maybe it will eliminate the quiet coercion. So, I mean, he does note that it's easy to get your expectations up or to talk about Bitcoin fixes this as if it fixes this. It doesn't. It maybe gives us the opportunity to fix ourselves. It gives us the, you know, opportunity to help desocialize ourselves from a cadence of civilization that is unsustainable, but the work is still our work.
Yeah. It's a technology. It's
Yeah.
no different than any other technology. In the right hands, it's a tool. In the wrong hands, it's a weapon.
Yeah.
And the wrong hands can always be used against the person wielding it. So like you can always weaponize it against yourself.
Yep.
You can weaponize Bitcoin by checking price action every 45 minutes,
Yeah.
freaking out about every tiny little FUD thing that comes out. And,
I mean, the interesting thing, we only check the price action because we have a notion of fiat that we're checking it against. So hopefully that kind of declines as one Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin.
Yeah. It takes a lot of hearing that to finally
Yeah.
kind of be like, oh yeah, you're right. Like,
Yeah.
it is useless for me to check what this dollar thing is.
But as an ironic point to this, in the middle of Brady's talk, through no fault of his own,
Bit duel.
Dual Bits.
Dual bits.
You see for at least the online video. There's an advertisement for Dual Bits. I have there's nothing wrong with. This isn't something about gambling being a vice, whatever. But it's there's an advertisement for something which is all about gambling on the price action of Bitcoin. So it's like the most fiat-minded Bitcoin-related activity you could think to do in the middle of this beautiful discourse about slowing the cadence of civilization down and returning us to a more humane cadence. There's also like, but you can gamble with Bitcoin.
Yep.
So
Yep.
you can still gamble. There's always going to be that.
Tools and weapons, man.
That's right. Yep. So
I can figure it out.
well, that brings us to the end of at least my notes on Brady's talk. Did you have any other sentiments, thoughts?
We're gonna link the video when we release this, and I'll put it at the end here, so it'll be right after we get done talking. But it's well worth listening to.
Yeah.
You don't have to watch it. It's a guy on stage. He's a guy just like any other guy. He's a good-looking guy. He's nice, whatever. But I listened to it without watching it a number of times, and it's dense, it's thoughtful, it's philosophical, it's deep. He's put a lot of effort into the words that he chooses to describe this and the a myriad of avenues that he's trying to go down in order to make a complete circuit of what he wants to cover. Morals and productivity and family and anxiety, all these things. So yeah, it did a great job. Like it doesn't have a ton of views on there, which is a shame.
Yeah.
Because it's very good. I mean, we decided to do this because we felt, I think you tell me if you think I'm wrong, we felt that this was a continuation and perhaps additive to Gigi and Zeno systems and the other
Yeah.
concepts of Bitcoin time that we've learned about. This is, standing on the shoulders of some giants and seeing further.
Yeah. So listen to our discussion of Bitcoin is Time by Gigi. Read the essay. Listen to our discussion on Xenosystems. I
It's
think
the
in
third
the
one.
third one's
Yeah,
where we
the
talk
third one.
about Land's conception of time, and also Bitcoin as a zombie, more so as an eternal thing, which implicates time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think maybe to sum up, Land gives kind of a philosophical taxonomy of notions of time, or a description of the progression of philosophizing on time. This is kind of like a quick popular summary, maybe, but we maybe begin with Plato having this absolute idea of time. Time is a container in which things occur, time is a separate thing. And then we get an Aristotelian notion of time. This is where Bitcoin is time is operating in this realm where time is a relation between objects in the world. It's like a temporal relation. Time is not a separate absolute thing. Time is a measure of entropy.
Yeah.
It's the arrow of time. The way that physical things move, we can then describe them in temporal language. So there's the Platonic absolute notion, time is a separate thing, the Aristotelian notion of time being eminent to the movement of parts of a thing, like a clock ticking. There is then Kant after that, where time becomes the limit beyond which we cannot experience. It's a condition of our experience. And then Land builds on that to say, yes, time is a limit, and therefore the ultimate philosophizing, the primordial philosophy that occurs now is thinking about time because you can, as interpreting Land, you can only think about it. You can only speculate as to the operation of time because it's otherwise not tractable in any sort of way. It is the limit of our understanding. So to go beyond it is to go beyond understanding, and that's valuable in Land's conception. Land conceiving of philosophy as an initiation into thought. It's something to get us thinking. And I just see that that's what Brady's doing here. He's getting us to think. He's talking about kind of our experience of time, you might say pretentiously, the phenomenology of time, this quiet coercion, the way that time operates on us when it's very fast, how that affects our lives. And so I do think that Brady's talk on time gives us a new angle for philosophizing and thinking about time. And so it's just very interesting.
Gives hope.
What's that?
It gives hope.
Gives hope. It does. Yeah.
Bitcoin is hope.
Bitcoin is hope. All right. That's great. Thanks, man.
Thank you guys for listening. Appreciate it. Have a good one.